Hello, lovely Soberinos, and welcome to this week's Friday Fix. Now, I'm also referring to this week's Friday Fix as the Sugar Fix, because this is the one that lots and lots and lots of you have been asking questions about. This is a question that crops up time and time again. And in fact, I think this is one of the main reasons why people end up in the Go Get Sober group, because they've been on my website and they've seen my blog about sugar cravings. So this is a big topic. And the question, how long does the sugar craving last and what can you do to get through it? That question, as it is specifically, is courtesy of Jason. So Jason, we're going to attempt to go some way towards answering that question now. So I'm going to do today's video in 3 sections. I'm going to do why. So why some of us end up having sugar cravings when we stop drinking alcohol. I'm just going to do that really, really quickly because otherwise it'll be a long video. The second part of it is how long does it last? So we will cover that in the second section. And the third and final section of the video is 10, yes, 10 top tips on what you can do to get yourselves through it if this is something that's impacting you. So without further ado, and I've got my notes here, just to make sure I don't miss anything, let's go through to the first section. Why do some of us get these sugar cravings when we stop drinking? Well, first of all, actually, let's go back even a step further and just be really, really clear that not all of us do. Not all of us get cravings for sugar when we stop drinking alcohol. It is only some. However, for those some that do, this can be a really confusing, frustrating and disappointing thing to happen because, of course, we've looked forward we've looked forward to stopping drinking as the kind of cure-all for our lives, that when we stop drinking, we're going to lose weight, we're going to get fit, we're going to do whatever it might be we want to do. And suddenly we find ourselves overwhelmed with these cravings for sugar. So it can be a bit of a slap in the face, a bit of a shock to the system when this happens. But be really clear, it only happens to some. This is not the same story for everybody. And what I want you to be really careful of doing is to not set up an expectation in your brain that because this is happening to other people, it should be happening to you. We all have very different experiences of what it's like to stop drinking. My experience won't be the same as yours, won't be the same as the next person's. So just be really careful that because somebody else has one experience doesn't mean you're going to get the same experience. Okay, but having said that, there are some reasons why some of us get the sugar cravings. So first of all, both alcohol and sugar trigger a dopamine reaction in our brain. So dopamine is kind of the reward chemical in our brains. So it triggers that kind of really feel good experience. It triggers feelings of pleasure. So, of course, if we were getting that dopamine hit from our consumption of alcohol and we're no longer consuming alcohol, we might naturally discover that sugar gives us a similar dopamine hit. We won't necessarily consciously know that that's happening, but it might well be happening at an unconscious level. And so the sugar kind of replaces the alcohol. So that's reason number one why it might happen. Reason number two, it's that alcohol is converted to sugar in our bloodstream. And so when we stop drinking alcohol, we stop getting that sugar conversion, we stop getting that hit of sugar. And so we might naturally turn to sugar to replace that. So alcohol is full of sugar and it is converted to sugar in our blood. So when we're no longer getting that, we might actually, again, at an unconscious level, but we might be proactively seeking out a replacement to that sugar hit. The third reason that this might happen is because, and this is more of a psychological one, if you have been using alcohol as a bit of a treat, as a bit of a reward, I know you'll have been using it for lots of other things as well. But if you are using it to reward yourself at the end of a stressful day, to relax at the end of a stressful day, we can make up hundreds and hundreds of reasons why we need that alcohol reward. But if we're using it as some kind of treat or reward or as something to look forward to, and we no longer have that treat or reward to look forward to, then it's completely understandable why we would replace that with something else that we can use as a treat to look forward to. Now, some scientists also argue that sugar in itself is an addictive substance. In other words, the more we eat it, the more we want it. I would add to that, from a psychological perspective, that we become more of what we do every day. So if you are going to eat the sugar after your lunch, eat the sugar after your evening meal, eat the sugar in the evening on one day of the week, you're more likely to then repeat that the next day because that's become the routine. Made more entrenched and more likely because it's an addictive substance. If you repeat that behavior or that routine every day of the week, then it's much more likely that you're going to continue repeating that behavior the week after that and the week after that. It becomes an entrenched, habitual program in your brain, a repeated pattern that you will do again and again and again. So the more you eat of it, the more you want it. And finally, I just want to make a point about the fact that both alcohol and sugar and other unhealthy activities, behaviours, substances, are often used to fill some kind of hole or to plaster over some kind of wound. So if you have, say, for instance, been using alcohol to alleviate boredom or loneliness, if you don't actually address the root cause of why you were using alcohol, so you're still bored and you're still lonely, then it's very likely that sugar is going to become a replacement activity for the alcohol. So if you were doing that with alcohol, it's possible you might choose another unhealthy substance or an unhealthy habit to fill that hole, to plaster over that wound. Did I want to say anything else? Yeah, so it's basically for comfort. If you were using alcohol as a bit of a comfort or a hole filler, you may well go on to use sugar in a similar way, or you may not. None of these things are set in stone, and like I say, one person's journey will be different to another's. Okay, so those are just some of the reasons why some of us go on to develop an unhealthy relationship with sugar. Let's go on to part two, which is going to be a bit quicker, which is how long do these sugar cravings last? And the simple answer to that one, folks, and you probably already know what I'm going to say, is that there isn't one answer. The answer is different for every different one of us. Some people, like I said before, will not get any sugar cravings at all. Some people will get a little bit of a sugar craving and then it will pass really quickly in a matter of days or in a matter of weeks. Some people will start to develop an unhealthy relationship with sugar, and that might last them a few weeks or a few months. For some people, it might last months into years. And I can tell you that 6 years down the line from first getting sober and staying sober in all that time, I still pay attention to my nutrition and my diet because I am aware that I will become more of what I do every day. So I want to instill really healthy habits into myself every day. Because if I do, for instance, a long weekend, or a week of letting myself slip on the sugar front, I know that I'm much more likely to continue on that sugar journey after that. So 6 years down the line, I'm still paying attention to what I'm putting into my body, and I'm not just willy-nilly letting myself have whatever I want, because I know that could be detrimental to me. But I see these as healthy lifestyle choices and positive choices that I want to make because they're beneficial for me, rather than I'm beating myself up with a big stick and I'm denying myself. It's not about denial, it's more about finding a healthy balance of what works for me, being self-aware enough to know what works for me and what won't work for me, and having the knowledge that we become more of what we do every day, and the patterns and routines I set on one day are likely to be repeated the next day and the next day and the next day, the more I keep going with them. So using that knowledge, using that experience, using that self-awareness, I'm able to make healthy and positive lifestyle choices about nutrition that help to keep me roughly, not perfectly, in a very imperfect kind of way, help to keep me roughly on the track that I've chosen for myself. Okay, so that's the answer. It's going to take different lengths of time for different people. It is a phase. And you know, in a lot of ways, I want to reassure you that it is just a phase and that it is something that passes. However, within that phase, you can make healthy choices as often as you can, but without putting too much pressure on yourself. Now, let me just check if I wanted to say any more about that. Oh, I forgot to forward that on. So how long? Yeah. So this was a point I wanted to make. That the important thing is not to assume anything. Just because someone else talks about the fact that they're 2 years down the line and they're still getting these sugar cravings doesn't mean that the same is going to happen to you. Just because someone else says, oh, they spent a couple of months getting some sugar cravings and then that finished, doesn't mean that's going to be the same for you. It's going to be different for all of us. And what I want you to understand is that it's important to not create an expectation in your brain based on someone else's experience. We basically create our own realities through what we believe. In other words, what you believe will become your reality. So if you're listening to other people saying, oh, it took them months and months and years to get over this sugar craving, that's likely the reality you will set up for yourself. So if nothing else, it's important to go away today from this video with that one understanding that no matter what is going on for anyone else, your experience is unique to you. Okay, so that's that bit. Okay, sorry, I've got a, as you can tell, because my hair's still damp, I've just washed my hair and it's still a bit wet and I've got a hair coming into my mouth. Okay, so let's move on to the third section. Let me move on my slide. What can you do to get through it? Given that this is a phase, given that you can make some healthy choices along the way, given that we're all on a different journey and there's going to be different lengths of time for different people, let's go through some 10 top tips on what you can do to get yourself through it. And I am going to consult my notes here because I don't want to miss anything. So tip number one, and this, folks, is where you might want to get yourself a little piece of paper and a pen. You might want to pause the video here and you might want to jot down these 10 top tips. Okay, so tip number one, list everything that you get from sugar. So what is it you get from eating the sugar? What does it give you? What job does eating the sugar do for you? And just make a list. Increase your levels of self-awareness. Be aware of what the sugar is actually doing for you. Is it filling a hole? Is it combating or alleviating feelings of boredom or loneliness? Is it a reward? Is it a treat? Does it give you a feeling of comfort? Does it fill a hole? Any of those things, and you can add your own to that list, but make your own list of what sugar is doing for you. Tip number 2, figure out, when you have that list of jobs that sugar is doing for you, figure out other ways you can get those jobs done. Because when you have a list of other ways you can get those jobs done, you can start to proactively do that, and that will reduce your need to reach for sugar to do those same jobs. Tip number 3, plan and prepare alternatives for reaching for sugar. So the same as we do with reaching for alcohol, you need to plan ahead, prepare ahead, decide in advance what alternatives you can have instead of sugar when you feel that sweet craving coming on. And not only do you need to plan and prepare for those alternatives, but you also need to practice them too. Because the more you practice them, remember that earlier I said that we become more of what we do every day. The more you practice healthier alternatives, the more likely they are to become your automatic habits. So, some suggestions for alternatives, and you might want to jot these down. A little bit of yogurt with a tiny drizzle of honey can be a nice alternative. A little bit of honey, maybe some seeds, maybe some nuts. An alternative as a dessert after dinner, or as an afternoon snack, or as an evening snack, whenever you would normally reach for sugar. Yogurt with a drizzle of honey, I find, is really helpful. You can make quite a healthy and nutritious version of a hot chocolate, which can be satisfying if you're having a sweet craving. And you can use dairy milk if you want to, or you can use soy milk, you can use almond milk, you can use coconut milk. I prefer to use coconut milk because it has less devastating consequences on the environment, but that's just me. And then using some cacao as opposed to cocoa powder. If you can find cacao powder, the difference between cocoa and cacao is that cacao hasn't been processed. It still has the nutrients left in it, whereas if you go for cocoa powder or hot chocolate powder, those have been processed, and in particular hot chocolate powder has a load of sugars and all sorts of things added to it. So stick with raw cacao if you can get it. However, raw cacao is very bitter, very, very bitter, because it has all those natural nutrients in it. So you do need to sweeten it with something. The advantage to sweetening your own cacao drink with something is that you're in control of the amount of sweetener you put in. So whatever your sweetener of choice, I tend to use either, what do I normally use? I think I normally use agave nectar, or I sometimes use honey, I sometimes use maple syrup, but it's down to me how much I put in. So a little cup of hot chocolate using the milk of your choice and using a sweetener of your choice, and ideally using cacao powder. That's a really good alternative. Another one is some pure dark chocolate, so 70%, 80% dark chocolate. You can't really eat too much dark chocolate because it's so rich and so nutrient dense that it's difficult to eat too much of it. So sometimes I find if I have a real sweet craving after a meal, I'll just have a square of dark chocolate and that will satisfy me. Another one is to eat a whole piece of fruit. It's much better to eat the whole fruit than it is to turn it into a juice. If you have a juicer and you're juicing your fruit, what's happening is that you are losing a lot of the nutrients and particularly you're losing the fibre that's in the skin of the fruit if you are processing it through a juicer. So it's actually much better to eat the whole fruit rather than juicing it. So fruit, some nuts and seeds is a good snack as an alternative to sugar. The other thing you can do with fruit is turn it into a smoothie. I find smoothies are a great way to get some healthy, fruity, sweet nutrients into my body, taking the skin, taking all of the fruit, adding some vegetables, adding some coconut water. Coconut water, incidentally, is a really good way to rehydrate your body. It's got all sorts of, what's the right word? Forgotten the word. I've forgotten the word, it will come to me. But coconut water has all of the kind of nutrients, vitamins, minerals, that's the word, minerals in it that we need if we need to I'll get there in the end, rehydrate ourselves. So it's a much healthier version of, these energy drinks that you get if you're doing sports. Coconut water is a much healthier way to rehydrate your body. So making smoothies with coconut water, with coconut milk, with just plain old regular tap water. But smoothies are a really good way to satisfy a sweet craving and get some goodness at the same time. The other thing you can do, and you can find recipes for these online, is to make little energy balls with dates, with fruits, with nuts, with seeds, that give you a bit of a sweet kick, but are also quite nutrient dense as well and do your body good. So there's just my own little list of some alternatives you can use when you get a sweet craving. But I have absolutely no doubt that you guys will have a range of different suggestions that will all be really, really helpful. So do post them below as well. So that was tip number 3, was to plan and prepare alternatives in advance for when you do get a sweet craving. And they're just some ideas of some of the ones you can use. Tip number 4 is to prepare in advance for those trigger times. So when you know you're likely to get a sweet craving in advance, you can actually plan for that and you can prepare for it and you can plan to do things differently. So let's say, for instance, for me, I know that after my evening meal in the evening, that's when I'm likely to fancy something sweet. So what I will do is I will plan in advance and I will say to myself, right, after dinner this evening, I'm going to have a square of dark chocolate. Or after dinner this evening, I'm going to have a yogurt with a drizzle of honey. Or after dinner this evening, I'm going to scrub my teeth straight away and I'm not going to have anything. In fact, what I normally do week to week, because this is the habit, the routine I've got into, is I just don't have sweet things after my evening meal because I don't want to create that pattern for myself. So you plan in advance for your triggers, your sugar craving triggers, and you decide in advance what you are going to do instead of eating sugar. You're going to create a new pattern and a new routine. Another tip, if you're not already in there, I recommend that you get in there while it's free to join. If you go onto the Go Get Sober website and you go in and you join as a member, you get access to the guidance program. And in module 1 of the Go Get Sober guidance program, I think it's step 2, you will find an activity called the Imagine the Difference activity. And that Imagine the Difference tool is a really, really powerful technique to use to prepare for upcoming trigger situations, whether that's to do with a trigger for alcohol or a trigger for sugar. It doesn't really matter what unhealthy habit it is you're trying to change, but that Imagine the Difference activity is a really good one to familiarize yourself with and to practice. And you can use that for either sugar or alcohol or smoking or any other habit that you're trying to change. And it's free now to sign up for membership on the Go Get Sober site, so I recommend you check it out and do that if you haven't already. So that was tip number 4. Top tip number 5 for dealing with sugar cravings is to really get yourself motivated. I don't know whether you've noticed this, but most often when we slip up or we find ourselves engaging in an unhealthy behavior, it's usually because we haven't really firmly decided what we're going to do instead. So, for instance, there are some days when I might wake up and say to myself, right, today I'm not going to eat any sugar, or today I am going to go for a run. And then it might get to the end of the day and I've either eaten loads of sugar or I haven't been for a run. And that's because in the moment I woke up and said that to myself, I haven't fully 100% committed to it. So when you've 100% committed to that decision, you've actually made that decision that today I am not going to drink alcohol. Today I'm going to stay sober. Today I'm only going to drink water. Today I'm only going to drink herbal teas. Or today I'm going to avoid sugar. Today I'm going to give myself snack A, snack B and snack C instead of the sugar. And I'm 100% committed to that decision. What you'll find is you'll do it easily. When you've made that decision and you're 100% committed to it, you follow through. It's when you're not 100% committed to it, it's when you believe that this is something you should be doing, you ought to be doing, you kind of want to be doing, but you're not quite 100% there yet in terms of your commitment to it. And there's a big difference between feeling like you should but not really believing that you will, and being 100% committed and knowing that you will. There's a big difference between the two, and you will probably already know what that difference feels like. We've all experienced it in some way, shape or form in one context or another, so you will know what that feels like. And tip number 5 is about how you can get yourself motivated enough to really commit 100% to that decision. So tip number 5 is about really thinking about your goal here. What are you trying to achieve? What is it you want to have happen as a result of avoiding sugar? Now, I think what I'm going to do in next week's Friday Fix is I'm going to do a Friday Fix all about how to set yourself what we call well-formed goals. And I'm going to share a technique with you that helps us all to do this and to do it really well and to set ourselves up for success. But for the time being, all I'm going to say to you is when you're thinking about your goal, so let's say you want to drop a dress size, let's say you want to look a certain way when you see yourself in the mirror. I don't know what it is for you, or it might be that you want to be able to climb the stairs without being out of breath. We're all going to have different things that we want to gain from living our life nutritionally healthy and in a healthy and fit kind of way. Only you know what your goal will be. But what can be really helpful to motivate yourself so you're 100% committed to that decision is to actually really tune in to what your goal is and really use your senses to imagine what you're going to see, what you're going to hear, what you're going to feel, what you're going to smell, what you're going to taste. Use your senses to imagine what success will look like. So imagine that you've dropped the dress size, or that you're climbing the stairs without being out of breath, or that you're the weight you want to be, or you're wearing the trousers that you wanted to be able to wear. Whatever it is for you, whatever your end result, your end goal is, just use your imagination to work out what success is going to look like. And use your senses to really immerse yourself into that experience, because when you do that, it's really motivating. It kind of tricks the unconscious part of your mind into believing that this actually is possible for you. It's a reality, it's possible. And that's really motivating and helps you commit more to the changes you want to make. But I am going to go into that in much more detail in next week's Friday Fix, how to set yourself a well-formed goal and how to set yourself up for success, whether it's sugar, whether it's alcohol, whatever the habit is you want to change. Okay, so tip number 6 is to set yourself some goals and targets that involve a healthier activity. Um, so something that can give you a sense of purpose and some distraction. So this could be something like a fitness goal. It could be, I don't know, for some people it might be something like being able to run 5K. For some people it might be being able to swim 10 lengths of the swimming pool. For some people it might be getting back on a horse. For some people it might be running a full marathon. It's going to be different things for different people, and it's okay if your goal is to be able to walk to the corner shop and back again. We're all at different levels of fitness, we're all at different levels of mobility, and our bodies work in all sorts of different ways. So you can decide on what the target for you is going to be, and you can work on that. And in working on that, you are distracting your mind from thinking about the sugar or the alcohol, and you are giving yourself something else to focus on. And that makes it easier to cut out the sugar, because when you can see progress and you're ticking off your small milestones along the way to reaching that target, it's really motivating, and it gives you the energy, the motivation, and the commitment to be able to say no to the sugar. So setting yourself up a separate goal, a separate target, and working your way towards that is a really good distraction, and it gives you a focus and a purposefulness that you, purposefulness, that doesn't sound right, it's probably not a word, but hey ho. It helps you to focus on something other than the sugar that you've been focusing on. So that's a really good one. Tip number 7 is to change your sweet cravings by changing up your routine. Now, a good example of that is some people, after their evening meal, will wait a couple of hours before they scrub their teeth, they get ready for bed, they do their skincare routine, whatever it might be, they get into their PJs and they go to bed. Now, for me, what's worked really well in terms of avoiding eating sweet treats into the evening is to scrub my teeth straight after my evening meal, because that sends a signal to my brain that it's kind of like scrubbing my teeth before bed was the signal to my brain that from this time onwards, we don't eat anything. From this time onwards, we're just going to bed and we're not doing anything else. We're relaxing. So the scrubbing of my teeth was a signal to my brain that nothing else was going to happen. Nothing else was going to pass my lips after I'd scrubbed my teeth. So by moving the time at which I was scrubbing my teeth earlier in the evening, it sent that signal to my brain that said, right, we're not eating anything else now. So it made it much easier for me to avoid snacking in the evening. So if that's something that sounds like it might be useful to you, you might want to try it. But there's all sorts of other ways you can change your routine about. Again, only you will know what kind of changes you can make to your routine to make this work for you. But changing up your routine is a really good idea. So that was tip number 7. Tip number 8 is to eat well. Eat as well as you can, but without beating yourself up. So the more healthy nutritional choices you can make for your body, the more your body is feeling sustained and nourished and energized by all of the good nutrients you're putting into it, the less likely it is to crave anything it doesn't really need. Now, I'm not about to sit here and give you guidance on what a healthy meal plan looks like. I'm not a qualified nutritionist, and I'm not a diet expert. I only know what works for me. There is plenty of information out there online about diet and nutrition, there are all sorts of complex arguments between one group of scientists and another group of scientists, one group of nutritionists, another group of nutritionists, one group of people saying keto works really well, another group of people saying avoid keto like the plague, another group of people saying you need a balance of carbohydrates and fats and everything else, and another group of people saying you need to limit your carbohydrate intake. You will find online an absolute minefield of conflicting information about what constitutes a healthy diet. And I've tried lots of them. I must admit, I have been through lots and lots of different types of diets. And when I say diets, I don't mean like a crash diet that you do for a short time and you end. I mean a healthy lifestyle plan, a healthy nutritional plan, a way of eating. That's what I mean by diet, is what I'm putting into my body. And I think what you have to do is you have to find the way that works for you. Because one way might work for one person and not for another. So again, there aren't any rights and wrongs. There's no shoulds. There's no this is how you should be doing it or this is how you should be doing it. It's finding what works for you. But one thing I would stress, and I think most people would agree with this, most nutritionists would agree with this, is you can't really eat too many healthy fruit and veg. Well, fruit is a question mark, but certainly green vegetables, multicolours, as many different colours of different fruit and veg as you can get into your diet is good. So salads, vegetables, some fruits, the more you can eat of those things, the healthier your body will be. And the healthier your body is, the less it will require sugar and other kind of instant energy hits or instant dopamine hits, because it will be getting everything it needs from what you're putting into it. So try and make as healthy food choices as you can. That does make a difference. Haha. Tip number 9. If the sugar or alcohol, and I've put both because they both kind of do similar things, and it's likely that if you've stopped drinking and you found yourself reaching for sugar, that they're both serving a similar purpose at some level. If the sugar or alcohol was filling a hole or was plastering over a wound, examine the wound. Take a look at that hole. Figure out what it is, what it needs. Figure out what needs to happen to fill that hole. Figure out what treatment the wound actually needs. You need to examine the wound. You need to treat it appropriately in order for it to heal. When it's healed, you no longer need the alcohol. You no longer need the sugar to be able to feel whole again. Now, for some people, that might mean having some therapy if they've experienced something particularly traumatic in their lives that's caused this. For some people, they might need a bit of counselling. For some people, they might just need a bit of coaching. For some people, they might just need to do an online program like this one, like the Go Get Sober program, which gives you some online coaching and tools. For some people, they might just need to do a little bit of mindfulness. And for some people, they might just need to get a little bit reflective, to keep a journal and to just reflect and think more about what's happening to them and why it's happening to them and the choices they're making. We don't all need to go to a therapist to fill that hole or to address that wound. But some people might. So it will be down to you to determine what you need to do to address the issues that have led to an unhealthy relationship with alcohol or subsequently sugar. So kind of working on you, I guess, is what I'm trying to say. Doing a little bit of work on you so that you no longer need to reach for those unhealthy substances and to repeat those unhealthy patterns of behaviour. And finally, tip number 10 is to actually plan your next step. So having watched today's video, maybe some of what I've said has made sense. Maybe some of what I've said is something you think you can take forward. But quite often, what we can find ourselves doing is watching things, reading things, and thinking, yeah, and nodding our heads and going, yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, that makes sense. And then going off and getting on with our lives and not doing anything about it. What I'm inviting you to do in step 10, or tip 10 rather, is to actually take the next step. So to ask yourself the question, in fact, have I got this on another slide? Yes, I have. Is to make a plan. So planning your next step, ask yourself one of two questions. What needs to happen next? So for you, in order for you to take the next step, what needs to happen next? Or the other question you can use is, what's one thing you can do today? What's one thing you can do today? And if you're feeling super organized and super motivated, you can get your getting sober record, you can get your journal, you can get whatever you're using to record your progress and your experiences, and you can actually make a list of all of the things that need to happen in order for you to put some of this into action and to take the next steps. And I would love to hear from you what your next steps are. What's the one thing you can do today? Or what's the another way of asking the question is, what's the first thing that needs to happen? So tell me in the comments below, what's your next step? What's the first thing that needs to happen? What's the one thing you can do for yourself today that's going to help you in your relationship with sugar, in changing your relationship with sugar? I will look forward to hearing from you, and I'll look forward to catching up with you in tomorrow's Saturday share. Next week's Friday Fix will be all about this, setting yourself a well-formed goal to set yourself up for success. So tune into that one, because that's going to be a really useful technique for you. Good morning, Soberinos. I realised after I'd recorded yesterday's Friday Fix that I'd missed off one really important key point to make in my 10 top tips. So I'm actually making it 11 top tips. The key important tip, which is an option, which I forgot to include, is that one option is to do nothing. One option is simply to wait it out, to remember that it is just a phase and you don't have to proactively do anything. In fact, the way I handled this, because I did have sugar cravings when I first stopped drinking, and the way I handled it was to think about it in terms of, I needed to go as easy on myself as possible, to make life as easy on myself as possible. I knew it was going to be a challenge for me to stop drinking and to learn new different habits and to practice different routines until I became completely confident and comfortable with them all. So I decided early on that I was going to do whatever it took to get me through. And if it took eating more sweet stuff, fine. I was still healthier than I would have been if I'd carried on drinking. So I basically decided to do nothing about the, oh, sorry, let me get rid of the alerts. I decided to do nothing about these sweet cravings. I just decided I was going to let myself have whatever I needed to have to help get me through. If I needed a treat or a reward in the evening in front of a box set or a film, I was going to allow myself the popcorn, the chocolate, whatever it might be. I was going to give myself things to look forward to, and I was just going to allow that to happen. And if my waistline expanded a bit or didn't shrink a bit, that was fine by me. The most important thing for me was to learn how to live life without alcohol. That was the important thing, and the rest of it could all just go by the wayside. Now, I'm not suggesting that that way of doing things will work for everybody. It might not work for you. I'm just sharing what worked for me, and I'm just putting it on the table as one option. It's to do nothing. It's to just accept that you need to do what you need to do to get through. You're still healthier. You're still better off than you were when you were drinking. And actually, you will get to the point with living life sober where you're feeling so confident and so comfortable, and it's starting to become automatic and easy, that you can then turn your attention to nutrition. You can turn your attention to living a healthier lifestyle, looking at nutrition, looking at fitness. For some people, it's easier to focus on one thing at a time. And for me, that was certainly the case. However, I'd also like to point out and to reassure you, if you're somebody that would rather not do it that way, that it's also possible to kind of kill two birds with one stone and to start as you mean to go on. So you might be the kind of person who wants to deal with it all in one fell swoop, and to get your nutrition right from the start at the same time as stopping drinking and building a healthier lifestyle right from the start. And if that approach works for you, then that's fine. Like I say, there are lots of different approaches that are going to work for lots of different people. I just wanted to offer you that option because I'd forgotten to do it yesterday, of going really easy on yourself, not worrying about the sugar, allowing yourself what you need to do, give yourself the treats, give yourself the rewards. If it makes your life easier and it helps you stay on your sober tracks, that's fine. You can wait until you're confidently sailing your way through life sober before you start turning your attention to dealing with nutrition and sugar and that kind of thing. So it's basically what's going to work best for you. But I thought it was really important to mention that because I woke up this morning and that was going through my head and I was thinking, no, I forgot to mention that yesterday. So there we go. I've mentioned it today. I hope you pick this up on the thread, but I will add it to the thread this morning. Hope you have a fab day today. Let's go get sober together and I will catch up with you soon. Bye.